Chapter 13:11. Safe Haven. How do the Krath regard each other? There's a very simple answer to that question: we don't know. As far as the Magio scholars of the tower are aware, there has never been a successful capture and interrogation of a Krath. Not even a cursory mind reading, since such things are impossible to perform through the mana of the fifth, which degrades everything that attempts to move through it, even magic. As violent and as brutal as they are, we have to imagine that the Krath treat each other somewhat poorly. It's difficult to imagine the Krath engaging in trade, for example, where trust and equivalent exchange are necessary for the practice to flourish. However, one truth must be considered above all others: in the most hostile environment in the dungeon, the Krath not only survive, but thrive. Surely this wouldn't be possible without some level of cooperation between them. Excerpt from The Savage Tribes, by Magio scholar Aranis. You were actually telling the truth, Zaluth grunted before spitting a dark glob of acid onto the stone floor. It sizzled pleasantly, emitting a thick, acrid smoke that tickled the Krath. If you don't tell the truth every now and again, no one will ever believe your lies, Ghazi said wisely, his eyes betraying his glee. Are you that pleased, you old slug? Zaluth said. Of course. I get to live, after all. Goo 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 goo. Chortling away, Ghazi moved away to claim a space for himself before the best homes could be taken. Despite the length of time the slime ground had been unoccupied, it was in surprisingly good condition, no doubt due to the cunning location the Suggoth had chosen to build it. Despite being relatively in the open, the entrance had been woven into the fold of the tunnel so well it had been almost invisible, an opening only 10 centimeters across, just enough for a full-sized adult Krath to squeeze through. Then, winding tunnels concealed the cavern within behind dozens of meters of thick rock. Even Zaluth had to admit it was clever. Kraflath, a voice called, and Zaluth tried to conceal the moment it took to recognize they were speaking to him by turning slowly to face them, with dignity. Trissith, what seems to be the problem? He asked. A young Krath, but full of hunger and ambition, as all Krath should be, Trissith had been acting under him as part of the scouts. The slime ground appears to be secure, Kraflath, she reported, her voice bubbling savagely. And what of the captives? They've been secured, as you instructed. Good. I want guards on rotation at the entrance, we can't afford to be careless. Very well, Kraflath. Where is Yoshish? I am here, Kraflath. Find the beast pits and try to take stock of the pittance we have left. The beast tamer practically bubbled with the depths of her fury. It will take years for us to replenish our stock, she hissed. We barely have anything left. Our previous leader was foolish in the extreme. Remember who it is that is trying to save us. Yoshish was a brutal and merciless Krath if ever there was one. She'd wrangle together whatever bloodbeasts and monsters the tribe had left and start from scratch. We need meat. The beasts we have left are starved and weak, and our stockpiles are gone, Yoshish warned. It'll be days until we get any meaningful food out of them. Hunters have already been sent out to secure biomass for the beasts, don't worry about that. It won't be long until you have something to feed them with. Our hunting grounds are lost too, the surly beast tamer growled. What are we even going to be able to get? Whatever the hunters bring back we'll have to do, Zaluth stated harshly. Your job is to tend to the beasts, and I suggest you go do it. Processing biomass into usable food for the Krath was merely one responsibility of the bloodbeasts, but it was an important one. With their mold gardens gone, and no harvestable food left here in this slime ground, the Slee would be hungry for the next while until they were able to re-establish themselves. Still fuming, Yoshish slid away, visibly struggling to contain her rage. The former Kraflath had used her size and strength to dominate unruly members of the tribe like the beast tamer. Zaluth would have to find another way, but he had no doubt he would succeed. In the meantime, Zaluth made his way over to the egg pond. Unused for many years, now it was filled with captured Krath, squashed down to the point they were barely able to fit beneath the slicing wires fitted above them. There were 3 down there, watchers assigned by the Suggoth tribe to keep tabs on their old home. It's unfortunate that you happened to be here when we arrived, Zaluth stated the obvious, and it's even more unfortunate that we only need one of you to send a message back to the Suggoth. A message of dire importance, regarding an invasion of the Fifth. 6 eye stalks swiveled quickly, moving from each other, back to Zaluth, then back to each other. So, the new Kraflath of the Slee tribe grinned, who's it going to be? Chapter 13:12. Gather the tribes. Neutral ground in the Fifth wasn't really something the Krath did. The tribes were always at war, and meetings between them were always tense affairs. No tribe wanted to reveal the location of their slime grounds, so the open tunnels were the preferred place to come together. However, the open tunnels were the most treacherous locations, filled with danger and perfectly ripe for ambush. "Are you sure they aren't surrounding us?" Ghazi muttered softly. "Shut up, you're going to give us away," Zaluth hissed softly. The two were pressed down as flat as they could go, their eye stalks extending only a little into the air to see what was coming. They were as hidden as they could be, but even so, Zaluth felt uneasy. Knowing what was coming, how could he not be? Any sign of them? For the last time, shut up or I will eat you on the spot, stealth be damned. Ghazi finally subsided, grumbling and sizzling to himself. The old slug was especially nervous. Not as fast as he used to be, he'd be a sitting duck caught out here. If the Sugith tribe decided to kill them, then he was as good as dead. Zaluth, however, was confident. News of an invasion of the Fifth would grab the attention of any Krath. It would do more than that, it would boil the acid inside their flesh, driving them into a rage. If there was one thing the Krath hated more than each other, it was outsiders inside their stratum. The air was thick with dense mana, the stratum was breathing, an auspicious sign. The two Krath remained hidden, protected as well as they could be as the monstrous life native to the Fifth moved around them. This section of tunnel was busy, filled with nourishing slime and mucus, which allowed a rich variety of monsters to flourish. It was hours before they saw any sign of the Sugith. A subtle shift of color in one of the mold beds, followed by a faint glinting of light, almost imperceptible. The agreed-upon signal. "Ghazi, they're here," Zaluth hissed. The two members of the Slee tribe made their way down toward the mold with extreme caution. At any moment, Ghazi feared a dozen fearsome Sugith warriors would leap at them from amongst the mucus strands, but no such attack came. When they were still 10 meters apart, the two sides beheld each other. The Sugith had sent 4 members, safety in numbers, despite pledging to bring only 3. It wasn't unexpected. For several long moments, 6 pairs of eyes extending up just a few inches from the mold watched each other suspiciously. Nearby, the monsters of the Fifth went about their business, unaware of the well-concealed Krath in their midst. It was Zaluth who broke the silence, uncompressing himself just enough to free his mouth so he could speak. "Welcome, brothers and sisters of the Sugith tribe. You welcome us to our hunting grounds." One of the Krath burbled harshly. "Speak quickly, Slee, or we will annihilate you on the spot." That they hadn't already done so was a good sign to Zaluth. Clearly, they were willing to listen. "The Slee tribe has lost its slime ground, this is the reason why we have been forced to come here. Before you ask, no, we were not defeated by another tribe, but displaced by an invasion from above." The 4 Sugith slugs trembled in rage at the mere mention of such an affront. Who would dare to invade the Fifth? Haven't we punished the previous attempts harshly enough? One spat. "The answer is surprising," Zaluth burbled maliciously. "Then who? Who is it?" "Everyone. The humans, the Golgari, the Karmado, the folk, the trees, all of them together. And they are using a species of monster they crafted as the vanguard. An enormous colony of ants." As he spoke, the other Krath grew so incensed they began to sizzle and pop, the rage igniting the acid in their flesh. "We will need to confirm your words," one strangled out. "Of course. If you head towards the old Slee territory, you cannot fail to find them. A word of warning. They are spreading a bubble of blue mana to protect themselves, and it is deadly to any native of the Fifth. Do not get close to it." The 4 Krath absorbed his words, taking a moment to calm their rage. If they exposed themselves here, they would die to the monsters, an embarrassing end for a member of the slug tribes. "If what you say is true," one gurgled, "then your presence in our territory will be forgiven for now. Of course, the Slee would be more than happy to return to our own slime grounds once the invaders have been purged," Zaluth replied smoothly. The Sugith were in a difficult position. They would like nothing more than to annihilate the Slee, but if they were found attacking another tribe during an invasion, the other tribes would surely annihilate them. However, that was only if they were caught. 4 sets of eyes watched him carefully, weighing his words. "We will assess the truth of what you've said, then we'll return to speak to you again," one stated finally. "Good," Zaluth said. "Soon, we will need to work together against a common foe. That remains to be seen." With the conversation concluded, both sides compressed themselves back down and slowly moved away from each other, making sure to keep watch the entire time. "That went surprisingly well," Ghazi noted. "Why did you have to drag me out here for this? I'm too old to be out in the tunnels like this." "I don't want you to feel safe," Zaluth replied as they continued to creep away from the meeting site. And someone else needs to be a witness in case something happens to me. Someone who would never be chosen to replace me is Krathlaf. Good point, Ghazi observed sourly. Zaluth was well pleased with how things had gone. When the Suggath had confirmed the invasion, the tribes would gather, and the full might of the Krath would be pitted against those from above. It would be a glorious purge, with much to be won, and he intended to be right at the forefront. Chapter 13:13, Adaptable. Solent had built her entire campaign around one central principle, adaptability. The fifth was an unknown quantity. Who could say what the Krath were capable of, or what conditions may arise down there? That didn't mean playing it safe, moving slow, absolutely not. That approach would only give their enemies time to gather and organize, time to muster their forces. If the colony didn't establish an impregnable clawhold within the fifth before that happened, all would be lost. Strike hard, strike fast, and adapt to whatever came their way. The vents had caused enormous headaches to the invasion, and ground their expansion to a halt, but that didn't mean that progress would stop too. Do we have an update from this section of tunnel in Quadrant 17? Scout came in a few minutes ago. General, the gap has widened, but hasn't been opened completely. Is it wide enough for the soldiers to get through? This was the key question. Why, yes it is, General. That's enough. Send word to cease work on that section of tunnel. We don't need to eliminate the pocket created by the vent, we just need to be able to get around it. Scouts ran to deliver her instructions as Solent fell into silent contemplation, staring at the model of the surrounding territory. It wasn't even the tunnels and intersections she was looking at, but something deeper, something larger. She was trying to sense the ebb and flow of the campaign, to see what was, and imagine what could be. Many options were considered, but after examining each with due care, she dismissed all but one. Send orders to all quadrants. Order is cancelled, we return to standard organization, and begin Operation Happy Meal. That's much earlier than planned, Leonidant observed from nearby. The situation has changed, Solent said simply. And it had, of course it had, but they had to make the most of a difficult situation. I authorize the use of the blue lure method as well, she stated. More runners dashed away to deliver the orders, and Solent settled back to contemplate the model once more. Given their current plight, this was perhaps the best they could do. For the time being, they were in a holding pattern. Construction continued on the fortified nest, of course, and the build teams had adjusted to the new schedule brilliantly, as should be expected from them. Operation Happy Meal was something they would have always needed to do, so it wasn't as though time was being wasted. Leonidant, have we identified the monsters we should be targeting? We have several prime candidates, General. Slime elementals and alchemy sludge monsters seem to be the best candidates to feed through the pipes. Smaller parasitic monsters are also suitable, such as the pulsing Mindrot or the false friend maggot. Even Solent couldn't help but wave her antennae a little in disgust. Vemiculus amicus falsus, she clacked her mandibles with distaste. This stratum really was a distasteful place, to harbor such creatures. What of the feeding apparatuses? Have they been assembled? Everything is ready, General. Your orders came at the perfect moment, Leonidant assured her. Feeding the happy little pets that were the woofers was an important component of the invasion. Making more woofers was one way to combat the contamination of the fifth, but strengthening the ones they already had was another. It had already been proven that the woofers could level up by purifying and consuming monsters fed to them through the pipe network. The trick was actually finding prey they could use in this way. The second trick, of course, was getting them into the pipes without letting them touch the blue mana, which would instantly begin disintegrating any fifth stratum monster. As her orders were distributed throughout the safe zone, the ants began preparing for the difficult task ahead. Teams were formed, lures were prepared, the carvers ensured the pipe networks were ready and up to the task. Then the hunting began. In many ways, Solent likened the strategy more to the human pastime of fishing, as opposed to hunting. Specially prepared spheres, each enchanted to hold mana within them, were carefully charged with purified mana, then launched hundreds of meters out onto the contaminated tunnels. The enchantments prevented the external energy from mixing with the internal, so the little ball filled with blue mana just sat there on the rock floor, seemingly uninteresting. But to the monsters of the fifth, that faint wisp of foreign energy was enough to drive them into a blind rage, and send them hurtling towards the source. As soon as the ants had a bite, they would pull back the lure, using the thin, enchanted chain attached to it, dragging the monster closer to the safe zone. Once the beast locked onto the greater source of in its eyes contamination, it disregarded the lure and charged headlong toward the waiting formation of ants. Then, the mages stepped forward, weaving powerful spells of binding, and the soldiers deployed their weaponry, engineered for this very purpose. The maddened monsters of the fifth were greeted with a barrage of magic that both damaged them and locked them in place, either by trapping their feet in the stone floor, solidifying the air around them, or capturing them whole in ice. Then came the spears, propelled from iron launching tubes that Brilliant had designed. They delivered enchanted payloads straight into the beasts, paralyzing the monsters so that the ants could continue their grisly work. If a target was suitable for woofer consumption, the manipulators were brought forward, huge contraptions of string and pulleys, designed to stuff the monster into the waiting pipe network entrance. If not, it was quickly destroyed and the core harvested. Then the lure was prepared once more. Within the captured territory, there were 12 separate hunting grounds, or fishing spots, and each was extremely busy. On their specially constructed pads, the woofers happily wibbled and wobbled, very much enjoying the meals they were being served. Chapter 13-14, Construction. What in the name of the Queen are they doing now? Tungsten demanded. Cobalt turned to look behind her. The edge of the safe zone had drawn close, much closer than either of them had expected it to be, and that meant there were thousands of ants in position up and down the width of the tunnel to defend it. Not only were they defending it, there was all sorts of activity, loud, distracting activity. Monsters roared, squelched and gurgled over and over again as the ants utilized strange, enchanted equipment to do something. Should we tell them to try and be quiet? Cobalt asked. Working on a modular fortress is tricky work, Tungsten grumbled before looking up, but I suppose they have their own difficulties. Right now, they were tussling with a giant, mold-covered turtle-looking thing. The monster snapped and gurgled at the ants as they labored to bring it down without leaving the safety of the blue mana. Both carvers turned their minds back to the build plans in front of them and tried their best to keep the distraction from affecting their work. Normally, they wouldn't have an issue, but the construction plan for what Solent had demanded they design and build was so inordinately complicated. Not because the final structure was necessarily beyond anything that they had seen before, but because of the way it was designed. Solent had insisted that the entire thing be built as modular as possible, so that the build teams could work on almost any section, without necessarily having the components around it being completed. There were limits, of course. Building walls and heavy sections couldn't be done without weight-bearing support completed. In spite of that, the fifth stratum fortress that they were attempting to build was proceeding, but in a completely piecemeal fashion. Tracking exactly what had been done and when was a nightmare, and attempting to build without knowing what the neighboring teams were doing made logistics extremely difficult. In short, it was stressing them out, and all the builders working in the fifth were growing increasingly irritated. Have the materials we needed been delivered? Cobalt asked one of the nearby carvers. They have, somehow, came the reply. Caught halfway into a complaint, Cobalt had to shut off her pheromones and grind her mandibles instead. If she could give credit for something, it was that Solent and her logistic organization were working flawlessly. Nothing had been delivered to the wrong build site, no supplies had gone missing, and everything arrived relatively on time. It was, in Cobalt and Tungsten's eyes, an ongoing miracle. Solent had assured them it would work, but they just hadn't been able to bring themselves to fully believe it. Now that everything was functioning as intended, they still couldn't believe it was working as well as it was. All right then, let's get going. Tungsten, I'll handle the interior if you want to work on the exterior. Smells good. The two split up and divided their teams into halves. Everything being worked on right now was part of the interior of the fortress, the innermost chambers, but far from being flimsy, or even sturdy, every section of this fortress was reinforced and fortified to an absurd degree. To make things even more complicated, the layout was difficult. It was layered, like an egg within an egg within an egg. Everything was designed with the flow of energy in mind. Mana had to be able to permeate outward, but limited when moving inward. The massive pipe networks were also highly complex, enormous in scale and delicate in construction. They were the most important element of the entire design, and they were being built in sections totally disconnected from each other, with the expectation it would all slot together in the end. It wouldn't, of course. Tungsten and Cobalt were both experienced enough to know that there was no possible way everything would slot together as designed, but solving these problems on the fly was exactly why they, the two most experienced engineers in the entire colony, were here in person. Be careful with that section, it has to be totally level. Check the design plans for the right specifications. The foundations for the pipelines were key to the entire design. Everything had been worked out in advance, down to the exact angles, and the lengths down to the millimeter. If the surfaces weren't prepared absolutely perfectly, then everything that needed to be layered on top simply wouldn't line up. Make sure you grade the hardness of the rock. If it doesn't meet specifications, do not continue until it does. We take as long as we need to get the fundamentals right. Do we have the reinforcing beams ready? Tungsten asked. We do. Great. Let's aim to get that in before the hour is up. We're still ahead of schedule, so take your time. Can you come take a look at this, team leader? One of the workers asked. Tungsten scuttled over and leaned down, using her antennae and other, more esoteric senses to examine the stone in front of her. With her forelegs, she grasped hold of the enchanted measuring instruments every team carried with them and began to take careful measurements. Still 1/3 of a degree shy of the level we want, but the density is spot on. Well done. The carvers pored over every inch of the build site, molding the rock, sinking the reinforcing frame in underneath and testing to ensure it was as perfect as they could make it. When the base was done, they began to install the complex pipework over the top, an even more exacting task than what had gone before. When it was all done, they would be capable of moving vast amounts of mana from the outside of the fortress to the inside, ready for the woofers to purify. These were the lifelines of the ants within the 5th stratum, and they would be perfect. Chapter 13-15. The finest creation. Purifying the mana of the 5th was not an idea that hadn't been tried before. In fact, there had been dozens of attempts, throughout the millennia. In fact, historical records indicated that the folk had made an attempt using specifically designed pets to handle the process, but were eventually driven out by the craft. So why did the ants believe they were going to be successful where others had failed? First, they were able to bring a level of labor and resources to the project that other empires or nations would struggle to match. Even for the folk, invading the 5th required an enormous amount of wealth, and the constant drain of cores used to fuel their pets became too punishing to continue. The colony did not, so to speak, use money. As long as they were bringing resources in, they were willing to expend them in the 5th. The number of cores they were willing to spend would be absurd to any other civilization. Second, they had developed a rich and thorough community, an entire caste, devoted to the research and rearing of pets on a grand scale. Despite their youth, the colony had progressed with incredible speed in this field, and were confident in their core engineering. The eventual result, the woofer class of monster, was wholly unique and extremely well designed. Excerpt from The Invasion, by Alberton. Bella and Ellie were busy. Extremely busy. It was a good feeling. They liked being busy, feeling as though they were contributing. They were ants, after all. Before them, a pile of woofers sat on their platform, joyfully wibbling and wobbling as the foul energy of the 5th was piped directly beneath them and filtered up through small gaps before being absorbed by the jelly-like creatures above. Except, mana wasn't the only thing being absorbed by the woofers at the moment. Ellie extended her antennae to tap one of the woofers and read its core. A library of information smashed into her mind, but she was extremely practiced at this, sorting through the deluge with ease to find what she was looking for. This one has reached max level, she announced. Quick, rotate it out to the top of the pile. The controller of this particular woofer hurriedly stepped forward and ordered her pet to move aside, which it did. They didn't move very fast, the woofers, jiggling their way forward with an ungainly backwards and forwards motion. Woo-woo-wuff. It wibbled happily, and the ant controller gave her pet a generous tickling with her antennae before encouraging the monster to rejoin the pile, but at the top. Another in need of levels took its place and soon they were back to operating at full efficiency again. Are there any close to reaching the 6th tier? Bella asked. Not in this node. Ellie shook her antennae. How many more do we need? At least 2, but it would be safer with 3, came the reply. Safer, or better? Is there much of a difference? Not really. The two turned back to look at the platform covered in adorable, wibbling blue jelly monsters. The woofers were performing up to expectations so far, but they had discovered something worrying recently which was forcing them to accelerate their plans. When was the last time these were checked for stress? She asked one of the nearby core shapers. Just a few hours ago, came the reply. Make sure you check every 3 hours, Ellie warned. The cases we've found accelerate quickly. It's best to be on it as early as possible. The core shaper nodded her antennae and turned back towards her charges with renewed focus as Bella shook her head. Damn 5th, she complained, is there anything? It won't contaminate. It can even break down mana, Ellie said. We shouldn't be surprised that even our woofers aren't immune. As indeed they weren't. It was necessary for the woofers to be exposed to the mana of the fifth, indeed, that was their entire purpose, but nothing, it seemed, was immune from becoming degraded by exposure to that poison, not even the woofers. If caught early enough, they were able to solve the issue, but some woofers had already needed to be taken off rotation in order for longer-term healing to take place. It was inevitable that more woofers would fall prey to the toxicity, slipping through the cracks, no matter how vigilant the core shapers were of their charges. That meant a more permanent resolution had to be found, and they already knew what it was. They would attempt something none in the colony had ever attempted before, a fused evolution. Of course, they had planned for it, chosen this path amongst many for the progress of the woofers. The woofers were specifically designed to undergo this process, but even so, nerves were high between Bella and Ellie as the moment of truth drew closer. "Do you think we'll really be able to do it?" Bella asked. "Of course," Ellie retorted, trying to give herself confidence. "Our planning was meticulous, but we haven't tested it. We couldn't test it, not without pushing the timeline of the invasion back until after the wave. How many are we aiming to combine?" 5. What they planned wasn't an evolution, per se, but a fusion of living monsters. Normally something that wasn't possible, but with certain types of monsters, it could happen. By combining 5 Tier 6 woofers, they wouldn't create a Tier 7, but something like a Tier 6.5. Some of the energy contained in the cores would go to waste, which was a shame, but reaching a Tier 7 woofer was unrealistic, particularly in the short term. This was why new woofers were still being raised as fast as possible in the 4th. They wouldn't be able to maintain the invasion if this fusion turned out to be a waste. But if it didn't, the first of the great woofer queens would rise. Chapter 13-16. Guard Duty. Chrysalis and I hold down the tunnel, with some difficulty, I'll admit. For my part, I cast an empowered gravity well and use it to press down everything in front of me. Any monster who attempts to make a charge toward this position ends up slamming face first into the ground as the incredible suppressive power of gravity flattens them. From there, it's a simple thing for Chrysalis to finish them off, or we just leave them. I mean, what are they going to do? However, creating a well large enough to cover the entire width of the tunnel, and also strong enough to be effective, would take an absurd amount of mana and alter juice. Also, I'd have to recast it constantly as the energy of the well would burn out pretty darn quick. So, I just cover the main section in the middle, which catches about 90% of all monsters, since they run straight at me most of the time, and I leave the sides to Chrysalis, who can cover them using her shadow portal shenanigans. And so we while away the time. I don't even bother moving, I just plop myself down and watch as the 5th gradually pushes in against the blue mana and flatten the monsters when they come. "I have a question, Master," Chrysalis says after a while. "Shoot, what does that mean? Ask your question." "Oh, I was wondering how much you were suffering from the call since we came here." "Ah, I hadn't actually thought about it for a while, which must mean it's doing well." Idly, I try focusing on that special location, right in the guts of the soul, where I feel that cursed hook has been lodged. Surprisingly, it still hurts like heck. Isn't it amazing what a person can get used to? Then again, I had a fair bit of ongoing pain when I was a human, so I guess I'm fairly used to it. Actually, is it possible that I experienced quite a bit more pain than most people when I was a human? I mean, life seems to be harder here on Pangara than it was on Earth, objectively speaking. There's monsters, and a dungeon, and ancients and all that. Yet, there's people who've never had their bones broken by someone collecting on their parents' loans. How does that make sense? I'm sure there are plenty of people out there who've had their legs healed with magic. They probably wouldn't even remember the incident, their legs were busted for what, a few minutes. Ha, I wish. The call is still yanking away, as it does, but it's nothing like it was above. The pain has reduced to the point where I don't even really notice it. However, it will grow stronger over time, and I'll be right back in the plops unless I keep going deeper. It's fine, I tell Chrysalis without going into too much detail. No reason to tell her that I am actually hurting, she'll just get bent out of shape. Not that she really has a shape. That's good to hear, Master. At least something good came out of coming to this awful place. You aren't wrong. The 5th is pretty terrible, isn't it? I'm not sure it has much in the way of redeeming features. It's disgusting, she declares, wiggling her tentacles to emphasize the depth of her emotions on this matter. The monsters are just dreadful. I've looked into their thoughts. Oh, bad, worse than their appearance, Master. Ouch, that's next level. If their thoughts are more disgusting than the way they look, What the heck are they thinking about? No, don't consider it, Anthony, that way lies only darkness. Oh ho, this is interesting, and a perfect diversion. A very sludgy-looking monster has gotten caught in my gravity well and immediately gotten compressed down to a puddle. But that doesn't seem to bother it all that much, and now that puddle is slowly yet resolutely squirming across the tunnel floor to reach me. Honestly, I never thought of what I might do if I found a monster who couldn't be flattened by a gravity well. I suppose a gravity bomb would be enough to crush its core, but it'll prove to be expensive if I need to bomb every single one of these monsters I see. Curious, I watch as the sludge slithers its way towards me, fighting against the immense downward pressure of the increased gravity. In an odd way, I find myself cheering for it. You can do it, weird slime thing. I believe in the burning, mindless hatred that lives inside you. Dig deep and embrace the rage. It takes quite a while, but eventually the little goober manages to make its way across the area covered by the well until it's only a few dozen meters away. At that moment, it gathers itself together, compresses itself even further, then springs forward suddenly. Void Chomp. You have slain. I let the familiar refrain from Gandalf roll over me. Talk about a telegraphed attack. Regardless of how squishy and morphable the monster might be, apply enough force to shatter the core and it's over. Interestingly, this particular creature didn't even have any parasites living in it, which seems to be somewhat unique down here. Just about everything is infested with something else. Just before I dismiss the encounter and start looking for something else to occupy me, I sense something in the distance. It isn't exactly a monster, and it isn't exactly mana. What the heck is it? Before I can question too much, it's already rolling through the tunnel toward me like a shockwave. The slime trails shake like leaves, rocks crack, mold goes flying as this thing ripples through the air towards me. Chrysalis, brace for impact. What is it, Master? It's something. Jump into my shadow, now. What now? Chapter 13-17, Breath of the Beast. Sometimes it's nice to have so many brains. Also, it's occasionally useful when those brains are capable of thinking in many directions at once. As the scary wave comes racing towards me, my newly empowered ability to think divergently kicks into gear. In no time at all, I spin together a force shield and start to sink down into the rock, even as it raises up before my head to protect me. Can I make myself blast-proof in a few seconds? Of course not, but I can absolutely make things a little bit more stable. Only the lower few feet of my carapace are embedded into the stone when the blast hits. As much as I want to see it happen, my eyes are my weakest point, so I absolutely ensure they're buried in rock when it arrives. With an audible THWUMP that hits deep and rattles all the way through my carapace, the wave washes over me and blasts back my antennae. Wait, what the heck? Chrysalis, did you feel any of that? I did, Master. What do you think it was? It felt like air. That's what I think as well. Feeling confused, I drop my shield and pull myself out of the rock, taking a good look around as I do so. Nothing has been destroyed as far as I can tell, but a lot of things have certainly been disturbed. It really does look like a singular, powerful blast of wind just came through. It was so dense and concentrated it looked like a literal shockwave. Who or what is out there generating enormous blasts of air that go through hundreds of kilometers of enormous tunnels? That makes no sense. Chrysalis, I say, not for the first time, I hate this place. I can understand why, Master. The rules down here just don't seem to make any sense. What's going on? What's the system? Vents are spitting out mana, from where? Why? How? Now this stupid air blast rolling through the tunnel is making me ask those questions all over again. Is it only going to happen once? Does it happen regularly? If only we'd managed to capture a Krath and get them to talk. Well, we don't actually need them to talk, we can read information straight out of their minds if we get enough time. Which is probably why they refuse to be captured. I've little else to do but sit on the spot and wait for news, since I'm responsible for guarding this tunnel and can't exactly leave until a literal army comes to replace me. I don't have to wait long for news, only 5 minutes pass before a scout rushes up to me from deeper in the safe zone. Hello, Eldest. Command wants to know if that wave came through this tunnel as well. Sure did. Wait, so it hit everywhere? Yes, the little scout confirms as she marks something down on her little pheromone tablet. From both directions as well. This side of the safe zone was hit all over, and so was the other side. Whatever it was, it rippled through every tunnel. That's crazy. What the heck is going on around here? Master, I sense something. Chrysalis emerges from my shadow. A dark mass of tentacles around a roughly spherical core, she slithers away from me before plunging some of her limbs into her own darkness. I can feel them emerge, out in the toxic mana almost 100 meters away. The mana is thinning out there. Oh, snap, really? I can't tell yet, but Chrysalis has a much finer mana sense than I do, since she literally uses it to see. Chrysalis says the mana level out there is starting to drop as well. You might want to report that to the headquarters. Really? That's great news. Putting it mildly, if the vents are actually stopping, that's amazing news. Of course, I'd love to know why. Swear to goodness, I'm going to get Chrysalis to attack the next Krath I see and pluck a few secrets out of them. They have to know what's going on around here if they've lived here for this long. And can you ask them to send a battalion down here to replace me? If the mana level is shrinking, then I'll be back out there soon enough. I'll let them know. Good luck out there, eldest. The little scout gives me a quick salute before scurrying away, and I settle back in to watch the tunnel for a bit longer. I'm half expecting there to be a surge in monsters after the air blast, but it doesn't eventuate, and they continue to trickle in at a steady pace. Which gives me plenty of time to consider the slime and sludge-filled tunnel in front of me. After ruminating for a while, I begin to wonder if I'm just overthinking this whole mess. The more time I spend down here, the more the fifth feels like a living, breathing creature. So, I start to consider the possibility. What if it is? Maybe this whole tunnel complex is, in some way, alive. That would explain some things, maybe. I suppose the only way we're going to find proof is if we get deep enough. Right now we're barely scratching the surface, and we won't be able to explore the depths for some time. After all, the major crux of the current plan is to construct an impregnable fortress that we can hole up in through the next wave, a secure launching point for the next phase of the invasion. In Solent's mind, and I completely agree with her, there is no hope for the colony down here without a completely impregnable safe haven. Once it's built, though, and once the next wave is over. Look out, beastie, I'll be coming down there to get ya. Chapter 13:18, Home Sweet Home. We need more meat for the beasts, Yojish gurgled at Zaluth, her tone flat and angry. Of course we need more meat for the beasts, Zaluth snapped, we need more meat for everyone. Our hunters are working as quickly as they can, but these are unfamiliar hunting grounds. These things take time. The rage was bubbling up in him, but he controlled it with difficulty. It wouldn't do to start chomping on the members of his tribe. The previous Krathlath had done enough of that and deprived the Slee of too many Krath. Some were incompetent, but others weren't, and now they were sorely missed. Soon the eggs would hatch and a new generation of vicious Slee would be born. It would take time for them to grow, but the Krath would never have survived if they hadn't found ways to put the young to work. Zaluth himself had tended to the mold fields, which had a much higher survival rate than the beast pits. After all, the beasts need meat. Now, you will need to make do with the supply we have, Zaluth hissed savagely, or we will be forced to seek alternate methods to slake the creature's hunger. There aren't enough beast keepers left for you to kill any of us and hope to replenish our stock, Yojish spat. I wasn't talking about you, Zaluth whispered with glee. You aren't wrong, the beast keepers are much too precious to risk. However, did you lay any eggs this season, Yojish? The female Krath's eyes bulged red with fury as her mouth gaped open, revealing her savage fangs. Zaluth slid away from her, backing up and giving her the space she needed to control herself. I'm glad we understand each other, he said, once she had calmed down. Yojish glared at him hatefully. The beasts will get their meat, he assured her, but do not question my decisions again unless you are willing to pay the price. And, away she went, back to the pits, while Zaluth turned to deal with the next emergency, only to find Ghazi waiting. The old Krath looked disgruntled, as he always did at the moment. His planned cozy retirement had become anything but, as Zaluth seemed determined to work him to the bone. And the more unhappy he became, the more Zaluth was determined to watch him. He'd shown how far he would go to survive, the cunning old slug, and Zaluth was unwilling to give him the chance to do it again. What word, Ghazi? Zaluth asked, turning both his eyes toward his partner in crime. The Suggath have sent a messenger, the old slug slurgled. They're waiting just outside the entrance to the slime ground. Well, we can't keep our fellow Krath waiting, Zaluth said. We should go and meet them immediately. Of course, lead the way, Ghazi, I'll be right behind you. It was most amusing to see the old Krath turn without a word and head toward the entrance, uncomplaining. He'd known all along that Zaluth would demand he come along. It would be interesting to see if he had any surprises planned along the way. The two made their way through the slime ground, and then to the narrow, winding entrance. Compressing themselves down, they slid through the concealed entrance, emerging into the tunnel outside. The two Slee on duty were still there, concealed in the nearby mold and slime, but they were alone. Zaluth and Ghazi both emerged, slow and careful. The eye stalks of the two guards twitched to acknowledge their presence, but never stopped scanning the surrounding tunnel. And with good reason. A dozen meters away, a pack of 6 Krath huddled together, compressed and concealed between the folds in the rock. They were visibly uneasy at being so exposed, and Zaluth didn't want to make them wait, not with the threat of invasion looming over them all. Prodding Ghazi to go first, Zaluth crept forward before he extended himself a little to expose his mouth. "Greetings, friends from the Sugath tribe. I am Zaluth, Krathlath of the Slee. I am Pujith, Krathlath of the Sugath," one of the slugs replied. "We will not stay long. Your words of the invasion have been confirmed. Our tribal enmity will be put to one side, and you are given free reign over these tunnels to use as your hunting grounds. We have already sent messengers to the other nearby tribes, and there will likely be a gathering soon. Will I be expected to attend? Of course. You're the most familiar with the invasion. We will send someone to give you the details of the gathering. Is there anything else? Our tribe is in a difficult position," Zaluth said. "After confronting the invasion, we lost most of our beasts, our slime ground and many fine Krath. Would it be possible for the Sugath to provide any assistance?" There was silence for a long moment as each of the slugs absorbed this extremely unusual request. "Assistance, from another tribe? That would be unusual. What would you need?" Pujith said slowly. "Meat, mainly. These tunnels are unfamiliar to our hunters, and we can't afford to lose any more Krath." One didn't get to be the Krathlath of a large tribe like the Sugath without being decisive. "We will deliver some meat in the next few days." So saying, they were gone, the 6 sliding away into the tunnel and quickly hiding from view. After waiting a few beats, Ghazi burbled a quiet laugh. "You asked them for meat," he chortled, "and they agreed. I never thought I would see the day when the tribes helped each other." "You probably never thought you'd see a mass invasion either." "True. Well," Zaluth mused as he began to make his way back into the slime ground, "at least I have some good news for Yoshish." Chapter 13:19, Colony crawls forward. It was slow, at first, but accelerated quickly. The vents, which had been spewing mana directly into the heart of the colony's claimed territory and surrounds, reduced their output and eventually stopped. Solent was somewhat pleased. "We return to the standard timetable immediately. I want alternative plans to handle vents within our marked borders drawn up within the hour." "Juliant and Subutant, you're on that. How do you want them handled?" Juliant sought clarification. "Containment. We won't destroy something we don't understand. Trying to do something drastic may well just blow up in our mandibles." "Got it, General." The two carvers scuttled away to work on designs and plans that could be incorporated into the grander scheme as Solent turned her attention to other matters. They'd been put behind schedule, and in a race against time, that wasn't something she was happy with. Work had continued, but the expansion and exploration which were such key planks in this scheme were dramatically behind. Currently, the blue mana only covered less than a third of the area required for the safe construction of the fortress. "Leonidant and Washington, I want you to find the eldest and get them back into the depths. We can't push deeper without their help, not even remotely as quickly, at least." "What about the Guardians? If they are willing, they should return to their assigned posts." The situation was so fluid and dynamic that perfect information was impossible to come across, but the colony's network of runners and mages did their best to relay information straight back to the command post so the model could be updated in as close to real time as possible, moving markers across the enormous, detailed model of the terrain. In many ways, Solent didn't need it. She saw the whole campaign in her head, just from catching the scent of the updates as they came through, but looking at the model seemed to help her think. Right now, orders were being sent out to the entire expeditionary force to once more press for expansion. The entire safe zone was a hive of activity, with ants frenetically running all over the place, reconnecting with their battalions and getting back on schedule. In fact, they had far more ant power than they needed right now. The waves of troops pouring in from the 4th hadn't ceased for a moment, even though they weren't able to reach their assignments. For the time being, they'd been absorbed into the already deployed battalions until such time they could enact their tasks. Throwing more ants at a problem wasn't always a way to make it go away faster, but it usually helped. With all of the problems the 5th was throwing at them, having more ants around to push back wasn't a bad thing in Solent's book, not at all. Into the chaos of the command post came two respected figures, just as rushed and hectic as everyone else. Ellie, Bella, nice to see you, Solent greeted them in clipped tones. How can I help you? The two core shapers looked at each other for a brief moment before turning back to Solent and speaking at the same time. It's about the woofers, they both said. Is it the degradation problem? I've been informed of that. Nasty business, Solent said. No, Bella said, jumping in before Ellie, it's about our plan for fusion. We wanted to know if you were willing to go ahead with it. Already? Solent queried, turning her full focus onto the two. This is far ahead of schedule. We need more woofers, and we need them now, Ellie replied. It's the only thing that can get us back on track. But we will suffer a tremendous loss in the short term, correct? Solent asked carefully. We will lose multiple tier 6 woofers in order to create a single queen. That's right, but in the long run, a queen will generate more woofers who will more than make up for the lost capacity. Eventually. Do it, Solent said decisively. What, are you sure? Bella gasped. We are here for a long time, Solent said in a businesslike manner. The sooner we produce the first queen, the sooner we cross over the mark which accelerates us past our previous pace. Despite the issues we are facing, I will always take a long-term payoff over a short-term benefit. That's how we will win. We'll get right to it, then. The two core shapers dashed off, and Solent shot them a quick salute before turning back to her work. If they were successful, then the entire operation would receive an enormous boost, with new woofers being produced on site from the biomass the colony couldn't otherwise use. I'll need to adjust the projections again, Solent muttered to herself. With less tier 6 woofers right now, that meant the expansion would be delayed yet again in the short term, but accelerated in the long term. The builders would have to focus more on the internal structure of the fortress before finishing the outer layers in a rush, which was basically the opposite of how it had been initially intended to go. It would be close. If they didn't finish sealing and enchanting the outer walls of the fortress, then it wouldn't stand a chance of resisting the wave. The schedule had been pushed right to the brink. No problem, she said and clacked her mandibles with satisfaction. I like a challenge. Back to the model she went, inspecting every little piece of the invasion as it currently stood. In a few minutes, she began issuing orders. A little change here, a little shift there. With the extensive planning and drilling that had gone into preparing the troops, major adjustments were unnecessary and unwanted, but like an artist with a brush, Solent would make a slight touch, and leave behind a picture that was just that little bit more coherent and clear than it was before. And if she did it over and over again, what would be left behind would be elegant, efficient, and flawless. Chapter 1320. The Scent of Slug Bad. Well. I've been cleared by the docks, and the vents have fallen silent, which means it's time to get back down to the depths as the colony continues to take territory. Yay, back into the burn, baby. Ah, the sweet sensation of my eyes being melted by acid, how I missed it. No matter how I try to force cheeriness, it's deeply unpleasant to be exposed to the toxic mana. It's difficult to think of anything else while I'm out in it. I mean, it literally burns my entire body, on the outside at least. And of course, it's constantly attempting to work in and melt me from the inside as well. Whatever the next stratum is, it cannot be as bad as this. Quick, touch wood, but there's no wood, damn it. Now I'm going to get down to the 6th and find out it's basically like standing on the surface of the sun, or something. Or perhaps the temperature is just absolute zero in there and I won't even be able to move. Come on, Anthony, think more positively. The 4th is such a nice, pleasant place to be, filled with life and light and sparkling water. Maybe the 6th will be filled with soft blankets that hug you. I can dream, damn it. I should probably focus. Despite leaning on my many minds and divergent thinking to monitor my surroundings, I do need to pay close attention. The monsters here are still a threat. There aren't that many around me right now. This close to the purified mana produced by the woofers, the native monsters were able to sense it and rushed upward to attack us a long time ago. New creatures are spawning, but even here, they're weak enough that I can deal with them relatively easily. The monsters down here are different from the monsters I've run into before. 5th stratum monsters aren't as directly strong as creatures from the 4th or even the more powerful demons from the 3rd. They don't move fast, or hit hard, or cut savagely, or attack with mana as relentlessly as the monsters from before. Instead, they're tricky. They do everything they can to spread their own particular brand of acid, or toxic slime, or putrid, contaminating filth, and let that do the bulk of the work for them. Then half of them seem almost designed to die. They explode in an eruption of goo that will kill even me if it touches me. Then out of the goo come 1,000 wiggling little worms that try to burrow into my carapace, or jump into a nearby patch of mold, just waiting for an unsuspecting monster to come nearby. I found a monster that literally attached itself to a wall and just fires a doom spike of doom at anything that comes past. Without my precognitive abilities, I would have been spiked, and then no doubt digested from the inside out as it injected me full of awfulness. I guess what I'm trying to say is, the monsters here are just as bad as the environment. 0 stars. Do not recommend. Gah, where am I supposed to go, again? I mentally check in with Solent for a second using the nave. I really need to use this thing more often, especially since it doesn't seem to be affected by the corrupting nature of the fifth like regular mental communication. Hey, Solent, how deep am I meant to go again? You asked me this exact question 5 minutes ago. Hey, it seems to me like that doesn't answer my question. Kinda weird you would waste time saying that, since you're so busy and all. I am busy. Extremely busy. Suor. I know she's busy. Follow the tunnel down for 3 kilometers. I can practically hear the mental sigh she is no doubt unleashing with all of her might. I cheerfully ignore it. Right, 3 kilometers, gotcha. The tunnel I'm in is just as comically huge as the ones I was in before, and it slopes down rather severely. Not that it's a problem for me and my amazing claws, I can handle a puny slope like this. My destination confirmed, I head on down the tunnel, keeping my eye out for parasites, worms, slime, mucus and all the other pleasant things I have come to expect from this place. Solent's plan for the initial invasion calls for us to push exactly 20 kilometers deep in order to construct the mega base that will become our safe haven in this stratum. At the moment, we've only made it a little over half of that distance, so there's a long way into the depths that I need to go. At least I know the colony is busy descending right behind me. The woofers are woofing away, purifying mana, and my family is scrambling to catch up to the schedule. After all the setbacks we've had, and sneak attacks I've suffered, I'm on full alert as I proceed down the tunnel. The deeper we get, the thicker and more disgusting the mana becomes, which is reflected in the environment. There's more strands of slime connecting the floor to the ceiling, more mold in all sorts of crazy colors, some offensively bright, others muted to the point they blend in with the rock. There's mucus rivers, even mucus waterfalls that ooze down from above and vanish into gaps in the floor, seeping far below. And the mucus itself is getting worse. Thicker, more virulent, with creepy colors flecked through it. I swear sometimes it moves on its own. Yuck. Stepping around one particularly disgusting mucus pool, I get a tingle from my antennae, followed by the sight of something stabbing out at me from beneath the surface. Exploding into motion, I roll to one side, crushing rocks, mold patches and a worm, as it turns out. Yet, despite my forewarning, the attack I saw doesn't eventuate. Or perhaps it did. There was a flicker, barely there. Suspicious, indeed. Well, this won't do. Gathering my mana, I put my minds to work, and soon the pool is subjected to an enormous blaze of dragon's breath. The temperature in the tunnel skyrockets as I unleash the scorching fire upon the mucus, which bubbles and churns in a frankly awful way. When all is said and done, I melt the pool to nothing. There were a few little bitey-looking eels in there, but I don't think they were responsible for what I saw. On closer inspection, I do find something else that warrants my attention. A gap in the rock, very small, very narrow. Not much could fit inside that, but a certain species of squishable slug could.